Okay, we've got looks like a smaller turnout. A few more folks might join us, but we'll go ahead and get started. Before we start, I want to welcome all of the community members in attendance. It looks like we've got about 8 people listening in, and more probably will be joining. My name is Laura Labisinaire-Miller, and I will be helping to facilitate tonight's meeting. This is our Fauntleroy Ferry Terminal Replacement Project Community Advisory Group meeting. We encourage all of you to email your comments at any time to our project team, and we will drop that email into the chat. As a reminder, we are recording these meetings and posting them on the video on the project website for anyone who's not able to participate. For the community members joining us this evening, you will be primarily in the listen-only mode, but you also have the opportunity to submit Q&A using the Q&A feature in Zoom. So if you have any questions after the presentation, you can use that feature. You can also enable closed captioning by clicking that CC button on the Zoom toolbar at the bottom of your screen. And finally, if you're joining us by phone, you can participate during the Q&A by pressing the *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute. And then I know our CAG members are familiar with the Zoom features that we're using, so nothing new, just the raise your hand if you'd like to speak during our discussion, and the chat feature. Okay, so let's get into the agenda. We are continuing our conversation on key elements that we will use to inform Level 3 screening, with the focus on the results of the Good to Go and Advanced Ticketing study. And then we'll also hear from Dave an update on the intersection improvements and an update from Charlie on real estate next door to the terminal. We've got time after the presentation for questions and discussion, and really looking forward to hearing your feedback. And with that, Hadley's just going to remind us where we're at with the timeline.
Thank you, Laura. Good to see everybody on such a nice summer evening. So I know we've seen this before, and this timeline really hasn't changed much. We're nearing the end of the Level 3 screening process, and we're moving into selecting an alternative to carry forward for further study and environmental review. And we hope to identify that alternative by the end of this year, and then complete Pell in early 2025, which is really just finishing the Pell study report that will serve as documentation of this whole Pell process, and that will carry into NEPA, which will allow us to have the NEPA process go smoothly and accelerate that process a bit, and then moving into design and construction in the 27-29 biennium, that 2-year period. We'll continue to have these community and advisory group meetings all throughout the process. And then this is just another depiction of the process we've all been following over the last couple of years together. We're a Level 3 screening where we've identified a range of alternatives, all of which keep the dock in the same location in Fauntleroy and have different dock sizes and configurations that we're working on screening using the criteria that we've reviewed earlier this year. And then we'll plan to be doing that screening process, applying that criteria in the next couple months to identify that alternative, which of these different alternatives we've been talking about, dock sizes, will move forward for further study. So that's where we are right now. And then this roadmap that we've been using over the last couple of years of our work together as a community advisory group, we're right here with the light green box. We'll be discussing tonight the Good to Go and Advanced Ticketing study, which a number of you have expressed a lot of interest in, and we hope to talk that through and how that technology could make the dock work more efficiently and really addressing that operational efficiency criteria. The last couple meetings, we discussed the traffic study and the environmental analysis. We're moving into Good to Go. And then our next 2 meeting topics will be the cost estimates and construction approach or phasing that we have heard a lot of interest in, and that may be combined into a single meeting or several meetings. And then from there, we'll move into the Level 3 screening and identifying the alternative to advance And that should all happen in the next couple of months before we wrap up 2024. And then we'll be looking at the Pell study report and the final documentation of this planning and environmental linkages process that we've been going through for the last couple of years. So any questions on timeline or process or where we're at and where we're going before we move on? Okay, well, with that, I'm turning it over to Dave, who's going to get us right into the main topic of tonight's meeting.
Yeah, thanks, Hadley. That was great. And thanks, everybody, for being here tonight. I know it's a beautiful night, and I'm easily distracted with the beautiful sunsets. And fortunately, I don't know who scheduled the meeting this evening, but they planned it so it wasn't in conflict with the Mariners game. So that's good. We got your undivided attention. So welcome again. I'm David Sowers. I'm the Director of Terminal Engineering, and I'm just going to kind of tee up what we've been working on as related to the Good to Go in advanced ticketing study. Unfortunately, it's taken us longer than we anticipated. This is a very complex topic to talk about and to evaluate. I'm going to introduce in a minute our consultant lead, who over the last year has been focusing on analyzing the data and then talking to people across our agency, the operations folks, our information technology folks, policy staff, both internally and in Olympia, and just understanding the feasibility of using Good to Go and how we would enhance the use of our Wave to Go at Fauntleroy. So we sent out a copy of the report. I hope you've all had a chance to look at that. And if you haven't, that's okay. Matt's going to walk us through that analysis and talk about how this would work. As part of the Pell study, we are considering strategies to improve terminal operations. And we were asked to take a look at Good to Go and Wave to Go, advanced ticketing, and other operational changes that would make it easier to walk, bicycle, roll, and drive onto the ferry. So the goals of this study, as you've seen this before, to improve operational efficiency. That includes processing vehicles more efficiently and supporting our vessel on-time performance. We want to determine the feasibility of implementing Good to Go at Fauntleroy, where WSF could replicate this at other terminals, again, to maintain consistency across our operations. We wanted to, as part of the study, identify policy changes and weigh economic justice priorities necessary to support Good to Go. It's a very critical part of making this all work. And then finally, we'll want to evaluate the viability of maintaining our current dock size at the terminal. And that was, one of the things to take a look at with the Good to Go and whether that was feasible. So before we get into what Matt's going to present on, I want to just kind of highlight our key takeaways based on the results of the study. And that is that WSF recommends pairing the Good to Go technology under option 2 with alternative A2 and advancing the alternative A3, which includes the Wave to Go advanced ticketing process into the level 3 screening. So alternative A2, just as a refresher, was the Good to Go option 2, which best balances operational efficiency and time savings up to about 1.5 minutes into our current fare structure. It's less costly than some of the other alternatives, and it aligns with our project schedule for the overall program. The other approach to advance into level 3 screening would be the alternative A3, which is the all-in Wave to Go advanced ticketing, which provides a shorter, lower cost option and saves approximately 1.5 minutes. So those are high clip results. Matt's going to dive into the specifics and kind of walk you through a little bit of the background of what Good to Go and Wave to Go are and how we kind of came to these conclusions. So with that, Matt, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Okay, hi everybody. My name is Matt Ringstad. I work for Jacobs Engineering, and I have a lot of knowledge in the tolling space. I've been supporting the WashDOT toll program for the past 15 years, and I've been program managing it for the past 5 or 6 years, if you round up. And so I've been involved in a lot of the facility onboarding as well as the back office implementation that has gone through to create Good to Go as you know it now. So I just want to kind of kick off the presentation for Good to Go. My idea is to give you an overview of what the paper contained, and then hit the high clip elements, and then save enough time for everyone to be able to provide some Q&A and answer any other questions you guys may have. So I will proceed through the first slide here and just set up the approach and remind everybody that the study builds upon the Washington State Ferry's traffic analysis to help evaluate operational efficiency for all level 3 alternatives. So we looked at how the model worked from the traffic analysis perspective in the previous deliverable that we reviewed it with the CAG last month, or maybe 2 months ago. And then we are leveraging that study and that model, and we're going to use the same simulation. We're going to add a couple inputs that allow us to measure good to go. So the model is going to evaluate 4 good to go options and 1 wave to go ticketing option for all the alternatives. So that goes from everything from A all the way up to C. As a reminder, the traffic analysis uses the ridership projections from WSF's 2040 long range plan and the 3-boat schedule. And I think I mentioned, okay, yes, the good to go. So this is just a quick reminder on what good to go is. Some of you may use it all the time. Some of you may never use it. Good to go is effectively the toll aspect for the facility, for the highway facilities. We have 5 operating tolling facilities at this moment with Tacoma Narrows Bridge, SR 167. We have, of course, the floating bridge on SR 520. We have the 405 hot lanes, and then they go from Linwood to Bellevue. And then we also have most recently brought on board the SR 99 tunnel. So those are the 5 operating components that we have right now. So we've had good to go for quite some time, since back in 2010, and in certain levels in the all electronic level. So this is the technology that we're looking to see its applicability on Washington State Ferry. So this is a unique charge in terms of what the paper was trying to unearth and how it could help aid those operational efficiencies at Fauntleroy as well as system-wide. All right, let's start off with the first option. I'm going to talk about Wave to Go because everybody most likely knows it from a user perspective, a customer perspective. So in addition to Good to Go, we heard a lot from everyone that wanted to know ways to improve Wave to Go, as it's the primary online platform that customers use to purchase ferry tickets ahead of time. And admittedly, it's a little clunky. It has some certain shortfalls with it right now, but I think the positive side of it is that that Ferries has plans to enhance this Wave to Go. It has already received funding to start that process. And those enhancements include like userability things that people expect nowadays with a handheld app that goes onto your phone. It allows smoother transitions to reload your e-purse or your multi-ride. So those things are already being thought of and will help smooth out some of maybe the reasons that we don't see a higher usage rate of Wave to Go. So put that on the side, and then let's talk about the triangle route specifically. So when we dove into the research, we found out that when we pulled the data sets, about 50 to 60% of the triangle route customers already purchased tickets in advance, but many customers reload their e-purse or their multi-ride tickets at the toll booth, which is a huge interruption and slows processing quite considerably. So if you take the average transaction of what a person does with Wave to Go and it being relatively speedy, when you combine that to those types of interruptions that could cost 1 to 2 to 3 minutes for someone to reload at the booth, with the cash and credit card transactions that sometimes can be much slower, cash being the slowest, you end up with a transaction processing system, a gate system that's just not working at its optimal. And I think everybody realizes that to some level. I think the cash payments being the slowest, toll booth processing times, can slow the ferry loading, especially during peak sailings where there's a large ripple effect because the demand is high. And increasing the use of any Wave to Go, advanced ticketing, Good to Go, any electronic system is going to save time. I think that's one of the things that the study overall provides. And then the last component of Wave to Go is I really want to emphasize that we took a slant on the study to maintain Wave to Go no matter what. We already mentioned that it's going to go through some enhancements and modernization, so that's great. And then if we brought in Good to Go, it would add another product in the line for people to choose from, whatever they're more comfortable with in terms of their familiarity. And it allows Wave to Go to operate, Good to Go to operate, and still maintain or give the customer choice and flexibility in how they want to pay for their fare. All right, let's get into Good to Go. So Good to Go, everybody kind of knows what the electronic tolling AET version looks like. Everybody's most likely been on the freeways. They know that they can drive by at 60 miles an hour and it's going to capture your tag or your license plate and then find you and send you a bill or apply the fare to the account level of the Good to Go platform. So everybody has that idea in hand. But I think in terms of us looking at ferries, we really wanted to maintain the idea that we could build out a bunch of options, 4 options to be exact, that increase in complexity. And I think the option 1 being the lowest complexity level and option 4 being the all electronic level. But there are definitely intervals of which you can tailor the technology to best fit ferries. And so we started with that approach and then worked through the workflows of what it would take to integrate those types of complexities. So I'll just do a quick run through of those 4 options. Option 1 is kind of our starter option. It's just Good to Go as a payment option. That is just everything is the same as it is now. The difference is that we offer a reader that can pick up a pass on someone's car, and then as effectively the toll booth attendant can price that out as they normally would, and that fare would be applied, and then they could just be asked, do you want to apply this to your Good to Go account? Yes. No. I'd rather pay with my credit card. Okay. Second is the light version. This is our semi-automated version. So this leverages just a bit more technology. So what we did is we took still a toll booth attendant, still a standard operating level of what we know now. But in this case, we leveraged the classification system cameras. The readers were able to actually assess the car that's rolling up, its length, and then pre-populate a price into the fare. So all the attendant has to do is effectively look inside, assess the vehicle passengers that are in the car, and add those to the price. And the price is already packaged. And then they yet again have the choice of being able to use Good to Go or a traditional payment method. Option 3, this is now we've now jumped a level where now a toll booth attendant isn't necessary. Option 3 is kind of that hybrid. We have a regular toll booth both are outfitted for this, so they could flex which booth they wanted to use. But effectively, you have a traditional toll booth, and then you have a what we call a parking garage methodology, where a dedicated lane for Good to Go is set up, and everybody with Good to Go or Wave to Go can enter into that lane and then pay for their processing. Now, to do that, a fare price needs to be assessed. It would be assessed through all the different components that we need to leverage for the technology to make sure the fare is accurate. And then the car would scan its QR code, let's say, for the Wave to Go app, or it would read the code or the pass on the car for the Good to Go, and the arm would raise and the car would move forward, and it would just keep in that sequence. So that was our third option. And then the fourth option is the all electronic option that could either retain the toll booths in place or remove them completely. I think retaining them in the short term to guide cars is probably the preferred method. But in general, it's everything that everyone knows of. It has cameras, it has license plate capture, it has everything, and there's no toll booth attendants, and people just roll through and get received on the other end by the operations crew that then would sort them. So that is a relatively quick summary of the 4 options that we looked at from a good to go perspective. Okay, so how does this fit into the project? This, for a Fauntleroy perspective, is trying to fit it into the overall screening criteria for the level 3 screening. Okay, so that's where we're at. So what the study looks at is which one of the criteria does it affect, and we identified 4 criteria that the study can influence. And the first is the obvious one, which is the operational efficiency. The second being the current project schedule. What does that timeline look like for implementation? Next is cost. Okay, how much does it cost for each one of these options? What does it take to bring this to a go live level? And then finally, we have the policy risk. And policy risk is, how does this mesh with the current policies that Washington State Ferries guides itself on? All right, so the study metrics are inclusive of these 5. I'm going to start with one that is not listed here, but it's just a little bit more of a high level piece, and that's just the obvious one, where it's time savings. We established through the model what the baseline numbers are, and then we compare that to what good to go option 1 through 4 look like, and then the wave to go options. So we have outputs that come out of there that can be compared directly to that model dwell time that we're looking at, and then the subtraction of the 2 values is the time savings relative to the baseline. So that's the first and foremost obvious one that we start with. We'll go into that one in the next slide. The next one is the scheduled sailing dwell time versus the model dwell time. So we produce model dwell times, and then let's compare them against what the scheduled sailing dwell times are. And then if there's any differences in terms of the possibility of achieving a sailing that normally the baseline model would not be able to. So we compared those 2. Then there's queuing. Queuing is a measurement of the performance metric of how fast you're getting the cars through the toll booths, but it's also looking at 2 levels. You're looking at the first one, which is how long is the queue length? What does that peak value look like during these peak demand times? And then how is that influenced by the different options? And then secondarily, how fast does that length reduce? What does that reduction rate look like? And how fast does it go from peak back down to a normalized level? So we kind of looked at that as another performance metric of each one of the options. And then, as I mentioned, we talked about implementation costs and schedule. We have a good idea of how long it takes to implement good to go. We've done it through many facilities. We're planning to do it on more facilities. We've gone through this enough where we kind of have an idea of what it takes to get the vendors involved that supply different components of good to go, and then apply those costs, and then apply things that require oversight and contracting and community engagement, and but the operations and maintenance costs that these things take, and then even influencing out into what the customer service center support would look like. And then to tie all that around, there's obviously oversight that goes into that as well. So those are all the things that go into the implementation costs, and also break up our schedule breaks, or our schedule makeup, to make the overall durations that we estimated in the study. And then the last 2, customer experience. Obviously, we looked at features that benefit the customer. So what do the fares look like? Does this improve on-time performance? It's less time unloading and loading, and then less backup along Fauntleroy Way. So all of those things come in and benefit the customer. And then finally, we have the policy and fares. So then fares are influenced by some of this technology. So based on what is occupancy detection as of now, and the technology and how we use it, WSF utilized some sample fares and tables to show how fares could be influenced by either not being able to use occupancy detection the way we want to, or having to minimize its effect, because there are other components that are driving it from the policy perspective, that I'll get to in a couple of slides that are going to influence whether or not and how effective occupancy detection can be, which really surrounds the vehicle passenger fare component. Okay, study results. Okay, so this is one of the primary bar charts in the paper. On the y-axis is minutes, and then the x-axis is alternatives. So these are all the dock sizes grouped together, and then each one of the bar represents one of our good to go or wave to go options against the baseline. And so this chart, what I really want to highlight out of this is how this duration is made. And the chart shows the overall dwell time, or the unload and load time that we use. And what we found is that through the iterations, the pedestrian and bicycle unload and load times start averaging out and become very fixed. The unload times of vehicles start averaging out and become very fixed. So if those all are fixed, all that I can influence is the last component, which is loading. And that's obvious because that's the toll booth transaction processing component. But just to give everybody an idea, that's the influence against all the components that go into the dwell time. So the overall good to go, wave to go provide a maximum savings of 3 minutes. And you can see that under the A2 graph, the medium green color in the second alternative is where that 15.8 is. So if you take 18.6, you subtract it from 15.8, you end up with about 2.8 to 3 minutes. You know, I think the average, the model is going to move a little bit. So there's a little tolerance there in terms of what that 3 minutes means. But as expected, the option 4, good to go option 4, shows that 3 minute savings. And then the last bar on that chart there shows 17.1 for A3. That is what wave to go is performed at. So that's a savings of about 1.5 minutes. And that is a good control to kind of see, you know, based on the averages that we saw, what does wave to go do and how does it perform against the good to go options. So I think that's a good example of where we are with the dock size that is of similar size today. And then as you move right on the graph, you see this giant chunk of lines that all seem to be doing the same thing. And that is based on all the larger dock sizes. So 124 and above. So I think we have 124, 155, and 186, if I remember correctly. And all of them start averaging out to be this 14.2 minute zone. And that is because we've reached this optimization, and the optimization is you can't save any more minutes. The vessel is 124 cars and the dock is 124 cars. So you create a throughput and an efficiency because all the cars are through the toll booth processing point and now waiting on the dock, and it's one full dock or one full vessel load is already passed through. So you've reached that optimum efficiency. So once you reach and you go above and you get up into the 186 car, you don't actually see any more savings. The other side of the coin is that you actually don't see a lot of benefit of good to go or fast transaction processing in general, because now you have the cars. Now there are skirt situations or use cases, as we call them, that do benefit good to go, in the sense that you could have a bunch of cars that are racing down there last minute, and they may be able to get on the boat because their transaction time is so much faster with good to go, versus if they have to stay and they wait and they pay in cash and then they miss the boat. So there are some benefits there, but I did want to highlight what the larger boats and then what that optimization means. All right, more study results. Okay, so the results of this study show that good to go and wave to go offer minimal benefits to the operational efficiency. It's really only 3 minutes out of that whole 18.6 minutes that are getting reduced. This slide outsides other key concerns. So I kind of talked about the demarcation and the in-between of good to go options 1 and 2 still have toll booth attendants and still have visual validation of the vehicle passenger. Good to go options 3 and 4 do not. And so based on that, we see that these are influencing the benefit of options 3 and 4, because what happens is that we end up having to compensate to maintain the revenue neutrality that we want for this route. If we were to do away with vehicle passenger, because we can't capture it correctly, because occupancy detection cannot capture age, disability, or a tribal affiliation if necessary. It can't do that. It can just count people in a car. That's where the limits of the technology are right now. And so there's a few things you could do to manipulate that, but effectively you can't get those discounts. Now you're not meeting the Federal Transit Act policy that requires it, because WSF is federally funded. So we have to keep those discounts intact. And if to avoid that, if you do away with vehicle passengers as a fare, then all of that revenue that is lost now needs to get reloaded into these fare tables, which we have examples of. So options 3 and 4 require an increase in fares of about 30% to align with available occupancy detection technology. Fare increases of this magnitude are unprecedented for WSF and would significantly burden people who are entirely dependent on ferries, living and working, for example, on Vashon Island. So this does have an immediate impact, because that increase is massive from a historical context. And then I've already kind of talked about the policy risks from a Federal Transit Act level, but then we also looked at it from a HEALS Act, which is the Healthy Environment for All Act, as well as the Title VI plan. And those are two fundamental policies that WSF follows. And they really do protect against disproportionate impacts to historically underserved and overburdened communities. So when you have critical services that are necessary and you're relying on that service, when you start messing with that in terms of price, it definitely impairs the purpose of that policy. So just putting that out there in terms of like how the policy risk is set up. And then, and it really follows those 3 policies. And then finally, cost and schedule. Options 3 and 4 cost the most. Just the technology and what it takes. We're looking at 14 to 17 million bucks to implement. And there is a risk to schedule because of the policy impacts that are there. The discussions there could be lengthy, could be stalled. There's a lot of risk that is built into that policy risk that are influencing the schedule risk on this project that would not make it not available for in time for when this project is to be completed with the preferred alternative dock. I think I caught everything on that one. I know that was a lot to chew on, so I'm gonna make sure that I caught everything. This is the table. So this table is in the paper. It's right at the end of the executive summary. This is a lot of information, but effectively it summarizes each one of the alternatives against each one of the options that we looked at. And then it also looks at the time savings that each one was measured at through the model. Then the cost, the associated cost, the associated time that we feel like the schedule would take to implement. And then a couple other elements where we just itemize out what the queue lengths are doing, so that we kind of queue length performance is what I would call it. And then policy considerations. So that's going to be all of these that are checked yes, all have some level of policy consideration that's in play here. And the reason I wanted to highlight one in this entire table, the reason that the policy section is checked yes for Wave to Go, even though Wave to Go is installed. If we were to influence any of these options where Wave to Go has to match its approach, that would be another thing that we would have to break free of, because it would be unique to Fauntleroy and nowhere else within the system. So there'd be this inconsistency within the overall Ferry's network and Fauntleroy. So this is something that would have to be worked through. It's a different type of policy impact, but I just wanted to highlight why that was a yes on that table there. So with that, I shot through a lot of information really quickly. I'm sure there's some questions out there. And I think realistically, I think just to go back to what Dave had started with at the beginning, we do find value with Good to Go as well as Wave to Go. And so the paper summarizes its recommendations by tying the Good to Go option 2 with the A2 alternative and recommending that to go forward with the level 3 screening. And in effect, there's the reason why is it's a good foot in the door in terms of getting this technology out there and tested. It best balances operational efficiencies. You get about a 10% savings. It retains the current fare structure, costs less, and aligns with the project schedule. So that's where the Good to Go got coupled and how we're recommending it in the study. And then finally, A3 is also recommended to move forward. We are going to see some enhancements and some modernization of Wave to Go here in this next biennium. And so while that's moving forward, that's going to help out, and it's going to give you about the same amount of minutes saved. And that could be more based on the usability that we see. So those are the 2 recommendations that we made in the paper.
Thanks, Matt. I know that was a lot of information. We have time for questions, feedback for Matt on what he and Dave have just shared, and how ferries will use this information to screen the alternatives. Angus, I see your hand is up.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate the presentation. Appreciate kind of all the details as it relates to the 4 Good to Go options and then also the Wave to Go option. And always kind of looking for, efficiency increases, as I know West Seattle Ferries is. With Wave to Go, it seems like, there's the slowdown associated with Wave to Go people in the same lane with non-Wave to Go. And then as you've kind of spoke to in the context of Good to Go, passenger charges that are associated with Wave to Go as well. Is there any thought that, and maybe I missed it, but a Wave to Go option where you have a separate lane and you don't have Wave to Go folks waiting behind credit card folks or cash folks? And then is there any kind of opportunity for improved, charging scenario, almost mirroring your Good to Go, what you discussed in the context of Wave to Go, where it's more like yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so first of all, I'm not the perfect expert of Wave to Go, but I can speak to it to some degree. And I think, yes, the answer is yes. All of those scenarios can be evaluated. I would also say that our Good to Go options 2 and 3, 3 being that dedicated lane, Angus, I think that's going to give you a similar measurement. But it's really going to be down. You're not going to save a ton by dividing the traffic, but you will see some efficiencies, but you also will see some backups get caught too, right? So you have a faster lane that's running through, but maybe there's a stall out, or not a stall out, but some type of interruption in that flow as the model shows. And then as you move, you try to get folks over to the traditional payment method, things bog down, right? Because it is such a tight little area in terms of dividing traffic. So the benefits are there. That can certainly be looked at for sure in terms of the way that they deploy it. I think internally, it's really more of Wave to Go modernizing and really making itself much more user friendly and quicker to get some of those easy things out of the way, those easy multi-ride refreshes, e-purse, all those kind of things that go into the base platform of getting people to buy Wave to Go early, right, in advance.
That's great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Angus, I also see, John, you had a question in the chat here about the likelihood of fares and policies changing to support the full automation Good to Go options. and asking if that would require the legislature to act. So I know that was before Matt talked about the policy and fares. Did that answer your questions, John, or would it be helpful to speak to that a little bit more? Are you able to unmute, John, or we can revisit that when and if you still have questions. Gary, I'd love to hear from you.
No, thank you. First, very good information. Second, exceptionally well presented. That was excellent. I actually followed most of it, which I was surprised, but it did a great job. The question that comes up is there's an assumption that if we try to impose some kind of occupancy charges differential, that it's going to cost more to administer that and potentially run us afoul of some federal regulations. The question I guess I have is it possible to, rather than imposing these on the ridership, is to let them choose themselves and say, you know what, I have 4 people in my car every day. There's 3 adults and 1 child. I do it all the time. Every time I drive through, charge me that. And maybe there's a way to opt out of that or something, but it strikes me that because I drive back and forth to Bothell often, it's like it's always the same. So I'm curious if there's something like that that would reduce the negative impact by lowering or the loss of fare collection. So it seems like an opportunity. So I'll see what you say. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely possibility for what I would call the commuter, base, where they're doing everything the same all the time. It's a challenge because even if you were to, pre-book it, and have that routine amount, I think it's still less about that than it is more about the increase or the lack or ability to give the discount. It's not necessarily about being able to, because I can create a flat fare system where all the vehicle passengers are a flat rate, and then you have the driver paying, and I can actually account for the driver being eligible for discounts because I can do it on the account level. And so you can do it in certain ways, but you can't, once you get to a certain point, you start losing that revenue cycle and you're not offering the discount, but you're keeping the fare alive. It's a disproportionate impact. So you have to kind of go one way or the other. At least that's just my first thought about it.
Thanks.
Thanks for that question, Gary. Judy, you've been waiting patiently.
Thank you. And thank you for the study, Matt, and your presentation. I want to go back to the study that the legislature requested 5 years ago from the university that presented not only some base information about good to go and wave to go, but also some suggestions for managing the line, the queue, until such time as technology could be applied and more extensively at this terminal. I'm wondering, because you folks did not bring up that study, we had to ask for information about good to go, and you followed through with that. Now, my question is, if good to go had been factored in from the get-go, because you folks knew that it could be a significant factor in designing this terminal, would we be in a different and better place in terms of understanding the physical design and also the budget for a new terminal here? if all this technology had been factored in, whatever it's been 3 years ago when we started, would the system, would the commuters be in a better place than what it looks to be the case now?
Yeah, thanks, Judy, for that that question and that historical context on the UW study on Good to Go. I'm actually wondering, Hadley, if you want to kind of speak to the that past study, and also kind of this is really about the process and how looking at Good to Go fits within the Pell process.
Sure. I think the short answer, Judy, is that this is the initial, studying it early on, because we're still in this very early planning phase. I think you're very right. If we decided to sort of tack Good to Go on at the end, or we were in 60% design or something, it may have been too late. But that's the point of Pell, is we're studying all options. We're studying all the different ways, not just capital options, bigger docs, but different ways that we can meet the purpose and need of the project. And that it has taken us, as Dave said at the beginning, a little longer than we thought. We thought Pell itself would be a shorter process, but for many reasons and complexities and a global pandemic, it's taken us longer. But this is early on, and this is from the get-go, and this is allowing us to avoid getting too deep into design. These are still just concepts, and looking at which concept we should move forward for further environmental review and design, and what makes sense to study in greater detail. And Matt's study helps us with that by identifying how we can define alternative A2 and A3, which concept of Good to Go we should consider as having the most merit to carry forward into that screening. And then to your point about the queue, you're correct that UW study really said there's many things we could do to operate more efficiently and provide some customer experience improvements with the queue. And the Ferry advisory committees of Fauntleroy and Vashon have been discussing just that. I see Justin nodding his head, so Justin, you can jump in if you don't want me to speak for you, but they, along with Fauntleroy Community Association and Islanders for Ferry Action, and a group on Vashon that's been working to help with some improvements to ferry service, has come to us with some suggestions, some of which are similar to what were in that UW study, and we're working with them on ways that we can more immediately, outside of this project, improve management of that ferry queue, and things we can do to see more immediate benefit before the ferry terminal is replaced. So that process is underway. Justin, if I want to speak more to that, but we kind of really appreciate that they've been working together, both communities, on things that could have a shared benefit, not only for the Fauntleroy neighborhood, but for customers, and that's happening. And some of that was spurred by that UW study a number of years ago that you mentioned, Judy.
Thanks, Hadley. I think if I had been in your chair, I would have said the same thing that you just did. I am still impressed that you folks have asked us to comment on multiple designs first, before we talk about service efficiency, before we work on just what changes, improvements in efficiency affect design. It seems to be a cart before the horse.
I can see that. And I think that's why we've had A2 and A3 as placeholders sitting there without much definition all the way through. I don't know if we have the next slide shows all the different alternatives, Laura.
Yes. I think so.
This might help as a visual. So we did ask you to comment on A, B, C, all of these different design options, and then we had A2 and A3 listed up here, and they didn't have much definition to them yet because they're more operational alternatives, Judy. So you're exactly right that we've a little bit cart before the horse, and the study took a little longer than we'd hoped to define what A2 and A3 would be, what operational efficiency, technology and policies we could apply to the same size dock alternative. And now we've defined those, and that's what Matt's study does. And that's what those two recommended path forward on 2 slides ago. So I hope that helps. That yes, those have been placeholders there all along for same size dock with Good to Go, same size dock with advanced ticketing. And now we have a lot more definition on what those alternatives mean. And in the meantime, we've been talking a little bit more about some of these other alternatives. Does that help?
I possibly. I just have to digest it. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah. And I think just a reminder, Judy, and for everyone, that as we move through screening, and that will be our, as Hadley mentioned at the beginning, we've got a few more topics to get through, and then screening those alternatives, and that will be another opportunity to kind of see everything come together in one place and provide your input before WSAP selects an alternative to move forward. I know there's a few more folks with hands up. Justin.
Thanks, Laura. And thanks, Matt, for the great presentation. I have to say, for what it's worth, that I felt a little bit vindicated in calling out the dramatic fare increase that would be part of Good to Go. I did anticipate that. I mean, the fare revenue, the passenger revenue's got to come from somewhere, right? I don't think Ferry is in a position to give up any kind of revenue at this point. So that's an important component. My question for you specifically, and I was looking through it quickly, but I might, forgive me if I missed this, but so there's the fares that many of us who live on the island rely on really heavily are the multi-ride fares. And I imagine that one couldn't, in any of the hypothetical Good to Go scenarios, in light of some of the functional stuff you talked about and the federal regulatory stuff you talked about, you couldn't simply increase the I guess I'll say the drive up fares and leave the multi-ride fares alone, right? The multi-ride fares would have to increase as well.
Yes, we do. And you can look in the appendix. Justin, is right. So I put it down in the appendix because it was just a lot of information, really compressed. So if you go down there, you can look at a couple of the sample fare tables just to show what numbers, how numbers moved up and down and most of them were concentrated in the vehicle passenger component, and then we did influence the multi-ride to some degree. But this is where the art comes into play with when it comes to the pricing and how the fares would be adjusted. You could spread it like peanut butter, right, across all the fares. You could avoid other fares and then impact certain fares and draw that line to try to get that revenue neutrality that we need, that you mentioned. The key thing is that, I mean, from the Good to Go perspective, is the fact that it's possible to even have multi-ride. Like, we don't offer that on the facility side yet. But the functionality proved out that we could develop something where on the account level, Matt Ringstad has a Good to Go account. And if he crosses any sailings, really doesn't have to be squared into even Fauntleroy by itself. But let's just say you took 10 sailings in a month and that was the rule, then it automatically at the end of your month shows a discount applied because you just met it. You don't even need to be part of the multi-ride component. It just counts how many you do. And if you meet the rule, it provides a discount. So I was excited that we were able to prove out the functionality that's there. And then separately, as you mentioned, there's just a cost or a distribution of revenue that needs to be agreed upon. And we took a couple versions of that to show how it could be done.
Yeah, I see it now in the example 2 fare table. I appreciate that. I should have scrolled back to page 86 and I found it. Well, no shade. You did some great work. But just so to be clear, so the multi-ride fares you're talking about, you could create a rule within a system. So maybe there's some options there, but multi-ride fares are not something that's currently part of Good to Go anywhere in the system. So that would have to be created for this terminal project.
You got it. Yeah, there's three. There are 3 primary ones, one of which we're actually working on right now and Good to Go, and that's the tribal waiver laws that have been passed. So the tribes that have agreements for free passage on the ferries and or are tolling roads, we're working through a solution for that right now. What hasn't been developed yet are age and disability, or multi-ride functionalities, but we have come up with ways to do it and how the business rules could operate within this system. And we already have room to be able to apply those rules. It's just having to go through the whole development process to deploy that type of functionality. But it is 100% possible, and we vetted it out in the paper. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so some challenges, not impossible.
Yeah, it's really on the I kind of touched on it just very briefly, but it's on the account level. So like when I say account level, it's just Justin has his good to go account. And then if you go to good to go and say, hey, I'm over 65. Here's my driver's license. Then someone on the good to go side would just validate it, and we would have a toggle inside the account that could be pressed, and then it would be like, okay, every time that you cross anything and the discount is eligible for a ferry sailing or a highway crossing, the 65 and over age has been met and it's been validated, and then any time you move around with that pass, that gets that discount. So that's why
you have to drive to Vashon, take grandpa's car.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, you'd have to maneuver it.
So that's where the stickers come in. Well.
Yeah.
All right. So let me ask the other WSF people. I mean, I bristle a little bit about the statement on A2 and A3, and I think I understand it now. But as a result of this study, are any of the alternatives from prior meetings no longer under further consideration for advancement?
Thanks for that question, Justin. So are you referring to those options all together, or those options with good to go and wave to go advanced ticketing?
Each one individually, with or without good to go. So for example, A and A1, are they no longer under consideration? Are the B and C alternatives no longer under consideration, or are they still however many of that is, are all the alternatives still being considered?
Yes.
Yeah. So Justin, all the alternatives are still being considered. What we're taking off the table is options 3 and options 4, where we do full scale implementation of good to go. Well,
okay.
Yeah. But there's an option for good to go that will remain in A2 and A3.
Just made it more complicated by introducing all of this new information.
Right. It's good. I'm catching up here. So, option 3, good to go, dedicated single lane barrier concept, and option 4, good to go, all electronic tolling, no cash. So those are no longer being considered for anything.
Not at this time.
Okay. Just to be clear.
Thanks for pulling that up, Sophie, too. That slide speaks to the different options. Okay, I know, Scott.
Maybe we can go back to the recommendations slide too, Sophie, because I think that summarizes it neatly why those are no longer why these are the two being recommended.
Yep.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Scott.
Oh, yes, thank you very much. Great presentation, really good information. I really appreciate everything that you guys are doing on this. Two things. One was a question and one's an observation. First, I'm going to go with the observation and the earlier question about the having a dedicated lane for wave to go. The challenge. It was talked about briefly by Ferry, but as someone who's been running it for 30 years, the challenge is 40% of the people don't use Wave to Go, and it only takes five cars to block the lane. So five cars that are coming down the way, in other words, that need to buy a ticket, is going to back it up into that here, and that place will be blocked. They won't be able to get into that dedicated lane, and that will slow the entire process. So that's why it's really inefficient to consider a dedicated lane. The other question I had here in looking at the different alternatives as far as fares were concerned, I saw something that had something to do with peak time pricing, which seems to make some kind of sense here, but I could not figure out how peak time pricing could work with multi-ride. In the fact that, I mean, most people that have multi-ride will go at peak times and other times too. I mean, over the course of 90 days outwards, they will have different times involved here. So if somebody could explain to me how we could do a multi-ride that works with peak and non-peak, I'd appreciate that.
Want me to take a shot at that?
I was going to say, Matt, is that something you could speak to? Or?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I was talking or mentioning with Justin some of the functionality that could be developed, and I think multi-ride is one of those, because Good to Go doesn't have that currently. But I think the seeds have been planted in terms of the benefits of that, and we did do in the paper. There's a section that we do, time-based pricing. So that would be very similar to 520. Right? If you've traveled the bridge, if you travel in the morning during the commute times, it's more expensive, and it's less expensive at night and at lunchtime. You can do that product could be broken up into two pieces. One being a time, sensitive multi-ride where it can be used at a certain point, and the system from a Good to Go perspective would just know what time you crossed, and then you would be eligible for either the multi-ride for peak or multi-ride for non-peak if both discounts were provided. That the discount doesn't exist right now, but if it was ever approved and that was something to provide, that could easily be put into the system and the business rule functionality. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, I want to make sure I understand it. It sounds very cool. So what you're saying is, if we had to do 10 rides over 90 days, it could be a combination of peak and non-peak.
Yep.
Then, okay, well,
you'd just be classified as a frequent user, and then whatever that business rule is, it would provide you the appropriate discount without fail.
And I think that would be a great idea, and I would highly encourage that you continue to pursue that. I thank you very much for the explanation.
Thanks, Scott. Anne, we'd love to hear from you.
Hey, everybody. Thank you, Matt, for everybody else who's worked on this. It's super interesting to see how it all plays out, and on the timing. I'm looking at the graph that has the block of optimization met regardless of transaction method.
Yep.
And wondering, so Wave to Go costs something, Good to Go costs something. Is this saying that even if you had neither of those, you would still meet optimization, even if people were paying with cards and cash?
Yep. See how they're all the same?
I totally see it. That's kind of a stunning thing to think about.
It is.
So then, does it make sense to spend the money on Wave to Go and Good to Go at all if those larger docks are built?
Right. And I think, right, they are relative to a giant dock. I'm not sure how expensive they individually are, but yes, I think there is a value. There is something there from the model and what the model produced in terms of this flat line of gain that you can get. You have this baseline that was set, and then now you no longer have those bottlenecks, and you don't have the issue of loading pieces of the boat at a time. And I think it is interesting that it came up that way. I did touch upon it slightly in my presentation, but there are benefits, like there's customer experience benefits that Good to Go provides. Wave to Go provides customer benefits and experience that you can just have all your stuff ready and be able to pass through very quickly. So if you were to have a chunk of folks, let's say a Mariners game just got out and everybody's racing towards the ferry and they're all coming in trying to hit that ferry that's just about to leave. If you have a faster transaction processing system in house, it's going to increase the probability of the as many as of those customers to make that vote. That's where it kind of becomes a benefit for that level. Once you reach that size of dock, those are the types of use cases that Good to Go and Wave to Go help.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a really great question, Anne, and really crux of the findings of the study. Okay, just gonna pause and see. We do have some Q&A for our members of the audience who are listening in, but just gonna pause and see if there's any other CAG members that we haven't heard from this evening that would like to weigh in. Fletcher.
Well, I was just reading through the questions a little bit and looking at the fare charts, and yeah, it's like the overall price like goes up with the Good to Go, like the Good to Go option, but like the passenger price goes to zero, which as someone who predominantly rides as a passenger would be desirable. But anyway, but yeah, I mean, I understand the whole, it's like just the complexities of it, but some people do actually kind of win under the some of the scenarios. Anyway,
it is, and it could drive customer behavior too, Fletcher. I mean, that is an obvious component that all of these types of pricing functions and strategies do. When we see them applied on large levels, you start seeing customer behaviors change. But that being said, that's where the technology limit is where you sit in the seat of that car. That is the limit right now. So we can't identify and provide certain things to accommodate that. And that's one of the reasons that options 3 and 4 are really difficult to release at this time.
Hey, Gary.
Yeah, thanks. And you actually just touched on my question, which is we are looking at the technology of today, and the technology of today wasn't possible 3, 4, 5 years ago. So, Matt, I guess in your crystal ball, if we see technological possibilities in 4, 5, 10 years, it might change this whole process. But I just want everybody to write for free all the time. So, hey.
Yeah, sure. I mean, my crystal ball is always a little fuzzy. But I can see that there is such advancements, and I can't believe I'm going to say this on a presentation, but there is such advancements in AI right now that it would be dumb for me to say that there isn't going to be some new levels of facial recognition that would be able to apply certain discounts and assess people in a free video capture system or method. Yeah, I definitely think so. There's actually an app that I mentioned inside of the paper called Ride Flag. Ride Flag is something that Good to Go is looking at as well, and it's for the reverse purpose though. It's for identifying occupancy detection, just identifying the number of folks in the car to make sure that they're valid when they're driving in the HOV lane, right? And this app is very, very interesting because it uses really progressive AI. It actually uses your phone and it captures everybody in the car and can distinguish between you and another person, as well as if there's like a mannequin or a dog or a baby. And it can actually fundamentally identify what's in the car and not store that information. So I will put that out there. But the idea is that you can put that into effect, and then it transmits the acknowledgement back to the back office system. that Good to Go runs on, and then it would identify your car and say that you've been acknowledged and have a little check mark against it and that you're valid to be in there. So the reverse of that is a little harder when you're trying to have everybody have a phone, assess everybody in the car, assess their age, their disabilities, anything else that they have, and then put a price to it. That's a little bit of a hard nut to crack, but it is. I'm not going to say it's not impossible.
Technology is evolving quickly, but there's still some big hurdles.
Big hurdles, yes.
Okay, Michelle. Did you have a question or feedback?
Me too.
Sorry about that. I couldn't get off of mute.
Yeah. Michelle, we're having some difficulty hearing you.
Oh, sorry.
We could hear you right before your camera came on. Maybe.
Oh, yeah, it's the camera. Sorry,
Okay.
can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yep,
great.
we can hear you now.
Yeah, so my question really has to do with this. I think the system would be great. I think a lot of people would adopt it and would love it. And I'm just curious because it's unique that people in the ferries, Fauntleroy, would be waiting, and then it's critical that they catch the boat and get on the boat. Now, the other systems, if the system goes down, you can still drive across the bridge or you can still move forward in wherever you're going. So is there a fail-safe if the system were down and you don't have toll workers to wave everyone on and take a card or cash? So what's the backup in the event that the Good to Go crashes? Because we all have to still get the ferry.
Yep. Let's see. There's multiple levels of answers there. I think how about I just address it on how it's done now with tolling? Because that probably is going to get us pretty close to what the solution would be as it applies to ferries. And the key there is that you actually have two separate systems. You have the back office system. That's the account level system that I've been talking about. All sorts of discounts can be applied to your personal account and whatnot. There is a front end part of the system that is called the roadside tolling system. So that's the things and all the technology that you see at and around tolling, like out in the roads, right? Inside of that, there are servers. And what happens is when the system goes down, it defaults into reader mode, and it actually collects every transaction, every car that's coming through. The cameras still work, or the readers still work on catching and capturing the cars that are driving through, and then they're stored in a base level. And so it's a fail safe that's built into the system where you just store it, and then when everything and all the power hookups are retained or built back, it stores those, and then it releases those transactions back to the back office, and then slowly culls through all the transactions to maintain the billing.
So in other words, it wouldn't come to a standstill. It would still collect the data, and then everything could go forward just as normal.
Yeah, it just kind of holds it at Fauntleroy on a probably not a floppy disk, but a server somewhere, and then it would release to the back office for processing once everything's restored.
Yeah. Is it also helpful to mention for Good to Go options 1 and 2, any distinctions in that? And that will have Good to Go as an option. So there's also the toll booth.
Yeah, and that is yes. I think, Laura, you're talking about redundancy, right? So you end up with just defaulting back to a normal traditional processing method with options 1 and 2. If any of the system wave to go could go down, or could go down, wave to go or Good to Go could go down, and you still end up, just being a traditional toll booth where you collect and assess the price at the booth.
Well, I think what Laura's saying is the one that we're recommending carrying forward has a booth attendant. So
Yep,
that risk is eliminated because you would still have staff. And none of this study didn't get into staffing, of course, and no, any reduction in staffing at the terminal. We'd still have terminal staff there. We still need the staff for many reasons to help sort vehicles, to help safety, many other reasons. So
Yeah,
there would still be human beings there, employees trained there to handle such a situation.
Yeah.
Well, I have one more suggestion. If you could add a line cutter protocol that would actually identify those people and somehow flag them when they get down to the actual toll booth.
Good. For enforcement.
Well, yeah, I'm not kidding. I'm actually serious. I mean, that would be pretty phenomenal if some sort of technology could be improved. But if we end up with one of the larger docks, most of that would probably be eliminated anyway. Getting everyone through Fauntleroy without all of that, congestion and angst that happens in that area. So.
Yeah, and I would say it maybe to address a couple of the comments that we've heard so far. The civil design isn't finalized by any means, right? We're in a planning level, and there's some positioning of toll booths to accommodate, dedicated lanes, to accommodate that really tight turn at the first things. You could push one of the toll booths down slightly, and it would allow for more capacity as you get there too. So, and mitigation against line cutting. So there's some things in terms of how you space things out in that civil engineering design that could help that as well.
Thank you.
Thanks for that, Michelle. Okay, Gary, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, Matt, I just wanted to, and I didn't live through the experience, but apparently the Point of Defiance dock had a problem with their system and they were manually running paper. So the challenge with that was to manually do paper for each transaction because the whole system wasn't working, backed up the ferry to like a 2-boat backup because it wasn't the ability to. So in your cool schemes of making things work, can you do something about that? Because that was ugly.
I don't know.
Sorry, I don't know if that's outside your scope.
It's a little outside my scope, Gary. But
I
could.
It's giving Matt all kinds of action items tonight.
What is this?
Michelle, I see your hand is still up. Was that from earlier? Did you?
Nope, that was
comment.
That was from earlier. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, well, I know this white paper study is quite extensive, and Matt has shared a lot of information tonight. So as always, we are, available to answer any further questions that come up. If you have a chance to dig into it further, or something comes to you after the meeting, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Hadley has been responding to, we've been getting a number of questions in the Q&A. Hadley, were there any remaining questions, or do you want to highlight some of what we've heard over there?
Yeah, I will just ask a couple. They've been coming in from, I'm going to ask one from each person here. And then those of you asking the questions, feel free to follow up by email if you want more details, or we're happy to share the draft study if you haven't seen it already. After the CAGs had a chance to comment on it. So some that I think everybody might be interested in the answer to, Matt. The 30% fare increase would apply to the vehicle charge, but would it mean less of a cost for passengers, or would there be sort of a benefit there to people who aren't driving the vehicle?
So just to be clear, the analysis is what happens if you take away vehicle passengers as a fare, and then you redistribute that revenue into the available fares. We focused on the driver plus vehicle fare, and then all the different components therein. we held the vehicle passenger stable to what it is. We did not influence passenger walk-on passengers. We didn't touch that category. However, I think we had a question earlier in the presentation about could you spread that distribution of revenue or lack of it to other categories? Yes, you can, but at what level? You're still not going to increase a walk-on passenger, twofold to save a few dollars in the vehicle driver category. So it is a little bit of a distribution game. That's the art of this, but we gave a couple samples in the appendix of the paper for people to review if they want to look at it and see how we did it.
But the fares would still be more than they are today for vehicles with passengers, with that 30% approximate increase that you saw in the analysis. Great. Yep. Another question is, if the boats run every 20 minutes or so during the peak period, how do you load the dock if it's 124 cars and larger in time to fill the next boat? And then there's some math here. I don't know if you have off the top of your head how that works, or maybe we can go back to that results slide of the amount of load and unload time we have.
Sorry, is the math that we're, here we go. Nope.
I can read it out loud. If it takes 18.6 seconds to process the average car, then processing 124 cars will take 2,306 seconds. I think you've got it all in this chart here. With
18.6 minutes is the whole load and unload. Right.
So I think that's the answer to the question for those of you that asked it. 16.2 minutes would fall well within the 18 minutes of load and unload time that we have. I'm just trying to visit this chart a bit.
And there is a chart in the traffic analysis section of the paper. I don't know the page number. I haven't memorized page numbers yet. But in that section, there is a modeled sample schedule of the 3-boat schedule, what it would look like in terms of the intervals from 2019, what it looked like. And then we put the baseline against that. And then we put against that all the different options and all the different minutes to show like maybe what was a no and you couldn't make it in the sailing, and what now you could make because of the gains in minutes. So just as a reference, I'm sorry I don't have that like lickety split off the head, but that is in the paper in the traffic section. You can look at that. It's just below the bar chart that we reviewed in this presentation.
Great. And we will be making that study public and posting it on the website. We just wanted to give our CAG, and we'll be meeting with our technical advisory group as well, a chance to review it. And if there were any questions or areas that didn't resonate well or make sense, a chance to kind of revise that before releasing it publicly and posting it on the website as part of all the other project materials. So anyone else who has public comment that we didn't get a chance to address tonight, please feel free to email us, or if you want to follow up on any of the details and technicalities, that can apply to that by email.
Sadly. Okay, I think we can go back to we just have a few final slides here in the presentation.
Before we move on, just as a way to summarize, back to that slide of all the alternatives, Dave, do you want to sort of recap what we're recommending moving forward with and what the goal? I think a lot of the questions I heard were more about the merits of Good to Go in general, but wanting to make sure we're focusing on this project and the decision we have on how to meet our purpose and need and ultimately replace this aging terminal that needs to be replaced. Pilings need to be replaced. That's kind of the root of what we're all doing here.
Yeah, I think I tried to get to the gist of the kind of the conclusion in an earlier question. But as you've heard from Matt today, he was very passionate about this. This is something that we wanted to take a look at. Judy cited some previous work that was done and our interest in kind of seeing how Good to Go could work. as Gary pointed out, there's still some technology issues and things will change in the coming years. But at least today, option 3 and option 4 would be very difficult for us to implement, both from a fair standpoint and a policy standpoint. But the all Wave to Go, or the sort of the starter version of Good to Go, where you still have the ability to make a transaction with a credit card or cash, could be an option, and it does provide some savings. It's not a lot, and as you know, that a little bit can help, but what we're trying to really achieve is more savings than what the benefit would be for this. So I think it was an important that we looked at it. It's certainly, we're going to take this into the level 3 screening, these 2 options, A2 and A3. I think we'll continue to talk about it. And I know there's some folks that work here today that probably want to listen in on this. And we do have a meeting tomorrow with our technical advisory group and the county and the city and others. And we'll be interested to see what they have to say. But this is kind of the recommendation, I think, for us all moving forward. And I'm glad we took the time and we did the traffic analysis and we did the modeling that Matt hit on. But this is kind of where we feel like we've landed in. Things can change in the coming years. The one thing that I don't think was said tonight was to talk a little bit about kind of the future and what the world will look like 10 or 20 years from now. Certainly implementing Good to Go in option 1 or option 2 gives us the ability to start contemplating it as AI develops or as other systems improve in the coming years. And so there's always an opportunity to kind of add to it by implementing this level of improvement. So I'll just kind of close with that.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. I think just to clarify that, because this study's goal was not to look at whether Good to Go could ever work for any WSF application or any other route or for ferries in general. It was really, how does it contribute to selecting a replacement alternative for the dock and timeline that this project's working under and the urgency of that preservation and replacement need. And all the work Matt's done now is really helpful to inform, any future discussions or decisions on Good to Go.
Thanks for reiterating that, Dave and Hadley, and just closing out our conversation on Good to Go. Dave, I think you are up next. So we have just an update on where we're at with the intersection improvements.
Yeah, so this is another thing that we wanted to make sure we got in front of this group. We have kind of initiated that effort with our consulting partner, Jacobs. We have been talking to SDOT and King County Metro. We'll talk some more with them tomorrow. So we're getting this sort of planning effort going. We will be out on site next month doing some early surveying work. So you will see some folks in orange vests starting to do that early survey work. And then we do have plans later this fall, early winter, to do some geotechnical work on site. So we understand as we site where these foundations will go to support the mast arms, we'll need to have some soils information there. So that work's going to be happening. Our goal is to go to construction next fall, so essentially a year from now, as the ferry traffic starts to subside a little bit. It'll be a good time for us to get out there and do the work. It's not a particularly long construction process, but we do need the next year or so to get all of our ducks in a row and finish the design, and then we'll get the work done in the fall. I know you're all interested in all the details around this, and we will continue to share updates on this in the coming months as we get closer and closer to making design decisions. And I know, of course, everybody's interested in how the signal timing is going to work, and that'll be an important part that we share with you.
Thanks, Dave. And Charlie Torres, you still with us? Do you want to come on screen and just, I know we don't have a slide for it, but just kind of wanted to share an update on where we're at with the real estate process for the property next to the terminal.
Okay, can you hear me, Laura?
Yep.
I'll just add that WashDOT's real estate team has been talking with King County as well as the tenant of the White House immediately north of the terminal and the big King County lift station about acquiring that property. And most recently, earlier this month, they provided the tenants with a list of relocation options available, and they're now conducting an environmental assessment of the property in advance of an appraisal. That's where they're at, and we're gonna continue to keep this group informed on how that is moving along. That's all I had, Laura.
Thanks, Charlie. Judy, did you have a question about that? Okay, I see your hand up, Judy, but
Lordy. Okay, sorry. What is the Ferry Systems intention with that property once the terminal is replaced? I understand you're looking to buy it, and I would assume that it is zoned single family, not industrial or commercial. So what happens when this project is over?
Well, Judy, there's a couple things we can do. Certainly, we think that having the property and the ability to use the space for our long-term operations is a possibility. We are very constrained on this site, and again, depending on what we end up building, we'll still have constraints. And so, using the house for office space or meeting rooms for our crew, the property would be used by WSF exclusively. There's always the option that the state could at some point do what we call surplus, and that is to sell the house. But we don't have any long-term plans in that regard. I think what we're trying to look at right now is having the property available for a multi-year construction project, having the space available for our crew, or place for our toll attendants to take breaks and use, and having that property in the state's hands was just a great opportunity, and King County was a willing seller.
Then can you assure the Fauntleroy community that it will not become a parking lot or other industrial type use?
Well, I can't guarantee anything in that regard. We don't have an intent to build a parking lot there or turn it into parking. I don't think the space would work for that. It would much better function as a place where we could operate out of for our crew, for people that have offices and conference rooms. So as long as the house is in good working order, I think that's probably what we would want to do. But again, there's no guarantees.
Okay. Well, obviously, all of that makes sense.
Yep.
Obviously, our concern is creep. The Ferry system would creep to the north, and we would be even less a residential neighborhood.
Well, again, we're trying to make a decision on what size the dock is now, and 100 years from now, I don't know what my what the next engineering director is going to do in a century from now, and certainly who knows. None of us can predict that, but at least for the next 75 years, to get through this century, we're gonna come up with a dock size that works for our operations today and for that future. And I think the building there, that little house just to the north, gives us some operational advantages, and it certainly helps us during construction.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We'll make sure to keep you all updated as that process moves forward. Other next steps before we close out tonight. So our next meeting topics, like Hadley mentioned earlier, cost estimates, approach to constructing this project before we move into the level 3 screening. So we will be in touch about scheduling that next meeting. And thank you again to everyone for spending another evening with us, just participating in the conversation tonight. All your questions and feedback. It's been great to hear from you all. And again, invite anything that that you think of after the meeting to send it our way. We know where to find Matt and the rest of the team, and I'm happy to answer any further questions that you have. Judy?
Any sense of when our next meeting might be? It's feeling like fall is already closing in on the calendar. So any prediction would be helpful.
We're gonna aim for early October at this point. And we'll be in touch as soon as we can with a date, Judy.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
Everyone.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Good
Night.
to see you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.